Hey everybody, Kevin Fishbane here from Pro Football Weekly, Shaw Media, Northwest Herald, other wonderful newspapers in your area, coming to you from Mobile, Alabama at the end of Senior Bowl week. We'll spend most of my week at Ladd Peebles Stadium, home of South Alabama, where the entire NFL world descends to watch a bunch of senior college football players work out in front of NFL teams. And one of the cool things was that the NFL team that coached the Bears, that coached one of these teams, was the Chicago Bears coaching staff. So John Fox, Dow Loggins, Vic Fangio, all those guys were on the field every day working with some of these players and then in meeting rooms, whatnot. So not only did we, the reporters who were here, get to watch some of these guys who were going to be maybe some first rounders here, second, third, fourth, fifth round picks, but the Bears coaches, GMs, scouts from around the NFL were there to see who's going to be the next rookies, who's going to be on these guys' teams next year. And we got a chance to talk to John Fox a couple times, Vic Fangio, Dow Loggins, Ryan Pace talked to us yesterday, and I don't know if anybody was more excited, certainly, than Ryan Pace to be here. I mean, this guy's a scout. He worked his way up from being just a grinding scout. Now he's the general manager of the Chicago Bears. This is a dream come true for a GM who was once a scout, because this is like the mecca for scouts, to be here watching guys actually play football as opposed to the combine, where you're just in Lucas Oil Stadium and watching what they like to call the underwear Olympics, what have you. So, by the way, shoot any Bears questions you have or draft questions you have in the comments, and I will try to answer them as I kill some time before my 3 o'clock flight out of here. I think I've had all that great barbecue food in Mobile. Actually, I haven't had all the great barbecue food Mobile has to offer. There's probably tons of more places I have yet to go, but I went to some pretty good ones while I was here in between practices. But back to Ryan Pace, general manager, he talked about how percentage-wise you're always going to get a group of players that you coached at the Senior Bowl who are going to be on your team the next year. That's just, look, I think John Fox said 87 players from the Senior Bowl last year were drafted, so mathematically speaking, there was probably a couple of guys on every team. The most notable one from last year, of course, Dak Prescott, which brings us to the quarterback position, where the Bears had 3 quarterbacks on their roster that they were really hands-on with all week. That's Nate Peterman out of Pittsburgh, who's probably the best quarterback here, C.J. Beathard out of Iowa as well on their team, and Sefo Liufau from Colorado. Those were 3 quarterbacks that every day quarterback coach Dave Ragone was working with these guys. Dow Loggins was working with these guys. John Fox got a chance to look at them. And then what we don't see on the field is in the mornings and evenings, these guys are in meeting rooms with the Bears coaches, and they're up on the whiteboard going through plays, they're installing the playbook. And Ryan Pace said what's great is the Bears coaches know what they're telling these guys each and every day, and they're knowing what they are telling these players to work on. So they're able to see the growth of these guys day after day. Back to the quarterback spot. None of these guys are going to be first-round picks. Probably none of them are going to be second-round picks. Every coach is kind of looking, of course, for that next. Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson was here a few years ago. Kirk Cousins was here. Derek Carr. These were guys who were not first-round picks, of course, but it turned out to be pretty good NFL quarterbacks. Now, is Nate Peterman going to be the guy for whatever team drafts him to be a starter? Probably not. What worked out. Dak Prescott's a talented player. He also had a really good Cowboys offense he got to be part of. So you got to have the right environment for an NFL, for a quarterback that you're going to draft. And we'll see if the Bears take any of these guys who are here. But if the Bears take Nate Peterman in the 4th round, don't think that he's the starter. If they take a guy in the 4th round, I imagine they've already done something in free agency or trade, or maybe even drafted someone number 3 like a Deshaun Watson or Mitch Trubisky or Deshaun Kaiser to kind of figure out that quarterback spot. But that was certainly a position the Bears were looking closely at this week. And I imagine they're looking very closely at the cornerbacks and the safeties. We all know the Bears need help at those positions. They need secondary help. We talked about it so much. This was a team that had the lowest amount of takeaways really ever in the NFL. I think the only team that had fewer was Washington in a strike-shortened season. So 16-game season, fewest amount of takeaways ever were the Chicago Bears. Are tied, I believe, with one of those teams from the 80s. So they need corners and they need safeties. So first question here coming to, I think that it needs a total overhaul, the secondary. I don't think it needs a total overhaul. I think they're fine bringing back Tracy Porter. They like what they have in Crayvon LeBlanc and Bryce Callahan. and DeAndre Hall. They just need those guys to stay healthy, which is a big problem, especially for Callahan and Hall last year. But those guys are competing. You need another guy who can be a starter. And remember, you can't really necessarily count on Tracy Porter for 16 games either. So the safety is a position that could probably use a total overhaul. To answer your question, Tyrone, that's where Adrian Amos just didn't make enough plays on the ball last year. Harold Jones-Corte was inconsistent. Deion Bush, young, raw. They still need more time to develop him. Safety's a spot where you could see two completely new starters here. Maybe one from free agency, maybe one from the draft. It's a deep safety draft, which we don't usually see at that position, with guys like Jamal Adams and Malik Hooker and Budda Baker considered to be first-round picks. There were some decent safeties down here that the Bears got a good look at. Looking at my roster here, UConn's Obi Melifonwu. Going to try to pronounce that correctly. 6'4". This dude's big, and he can move a little bit too. So that's something the Bears coaches got a very good look at him. And can he translate that great size to covering tight ends, covering big wide receivers if he needs to, making plays in the box? So he's somebody to kind of file that name away down the line, see how he does at the combine. But he certainly has the size desired for that position. Nate Jerry out of Nebraska, another guy with good size, just a shade under 6'2". He had an interception yesterday's practice. So these are some of the guys that the Bears got close look at safety. At cornerback, maybe the best corner on the team they coached was Rasul Douglas out of West Virginia. Had a lot of picks last year. This dude has a lot of strength. Kind of reminds me of DeAndre Hall in the way he's built with long arms, and he's pretty tall, but seems a lot stronger. So he's going to need to obviously work on his fluidity and coverage, and we'll see a little bit more of that down at the combine in Indianapolis at the end of the month. Question here about what about Zay Jones at wide receiver. Zay Jones actually is one of my favorite players down here. East Carolina product, seemed to catch everything thrown his way, moved pretty well in terms of his route running. If I had to rank the receivers here, North Carolina's Ryan Switzer was pretty good. Probably the best receiver that I saw, going back to my roster here, Michigan's Amara Darboh was maybe the best pure receiver, I think, that I watched. Also, the South team had a couple pretty good ones. Trevin Durrell from LSU. But certainly, Zay Lewis was a pretty good one. Jordan Lewis, another question here about the Michigan corner. It's actually funny, when he measured in at the weigh-in, Jordan Lewis measured in at 5'10", which was important for him to show he was 5'10" and not 5'9" and something. Just that extra quarter inch, half inch, maybe he was on his tippy toes just a bit, helps, because that's someone who's an aggressive guy in coverage. Actually, John Fox talked about Jordan Lewis yesterday in terms of how he's impressed the way he plays big. We saw that when in his career at Michigan. He's got good ball skills. He's certainly an early to mid-round corner, mid-round guy to keep an eye on. Amongst some of these defensive backs. But, when you have a position as deep like corner and safety, you're going to see some pretty good players down here in Mobile, Alabama. So the Bears got to take a pretty good look at some of those corners and safeties. Another position of need for the Bears is tight end. They're not going to draft O.J. Howard in the first round. But this Alabama guy, y'all watched him in college. He was pretty darn good in college. He was the best player here in Mobile, probably. Just a man among boys at times. But don't sleep on Evan Ingram out of Ole Miss. Another tight end product. He's a guy that looked pretty good too. I think the Bears got to find another guy at that position, bolster the pass catching group, and just give Zach Miller a better complement to work with. Question here about Nate Peterman. I thought he had the best ball of the group in terms of the way his passes looked, tight spirals, good accuracy. He had good footwork, which was impressive. The arm strength, it was kind of hard to tell with him. The guys that had the strongest arms were on the other team. Davis Webb out of Cal, Josh Dobbs out of Tennessee, but those guys struggled in terms of accuracy. So, that's why I think Peterman might be the best one here because, he seemed to be a little bit more accurate than the other ones. Mike DeFabo checking in. Hi, Mike. No Purdue guys down here. Mike covers the Boilermakers, and no Purdue guys there. So you're obviously cursed there for Purdue there, Mike. We had a question here. Will the Bears draft a quarterback with the first pick? I assume you mean the third pick, though, their first pick of the draft, and it's a great question. I think if Ryan Pace and John Fox have identified a quarterback as a surefire, long-term franchise QB, whether that's Deshaun Watson, Deshaun Kaiser, Mitch Trubisky, those are the three guys who are going to be there at number 3. If they've actually identified one of those guys as their long-term starter, well, you got to do it. You got to take him when you can. Maybe they can afford trading down, looking at teams behind them that maybe those teams aren't going to draft quarterbacks, but a team could trade up and jump in front of them. So now, do I think one of those guys is worthy of the number 3 pick? No, not necessarily. I haven't done enough research on them myself. But with the quarterback position, you kind of have to say, well, you kind of move that spot up. It's the most important position in the field. Bears have to stop ignoring it. But I'd like to see them take somebody, maybe trade back into the end of the first round to take a quarterback, maybe take someone in the second. Pat Mahomes is the guy that's intriguing. I'd like to see a little bit more of him. I mentioned Nate Peterman here, Brad Kye out of Miami. There are certain guys they could take a look at in the second, third, fourth round. Maybe bring back Brian Hoyer. Maybe you make a trade for somebody. Still unclear what they're going to do. I'm pretty confident that quarterback day one next year won't necessarily be Jay Cutler. Who that guy will be, that's a great question. But number 3 is going to be rich for some of these quarterbacks. But if they believe in the guy, if they're so confident in him, you got to take him whenever you can. Jonathan Allen, Deshaun Watson, Jamal Adams, or Reuben Foster. Who would I prefer? Well, again, the Watson thing makes it so difficult because, no draft board has Deshaun Watson as the top pick, top 3 pick, top 5 pick, top 10 guy. But he's the quarterback. It's the most important position in the field. If the Bears are convinced on Deshaun Watson that he's their guy, then they got to do it. But I don't know if they'll be convinced of that. It seems like Jonathan Allen's probably the best player of that group. When you're talking about Bears needs, Jamal Adams might be a better fit for what the Bears need. But Brian Pace has been very firm, best player available. That's who he's going to be looking for in the draft, like he always does at every pick. And Jonathan Allen might be the best player available at number 3. And can you match the defensive line? Picture this front 7: Jonathan Allen, Eddie Goldman, Akeem Hicks, Leonard Floyd, Danny Trevathan, Jarrell Freeman, and Leonard Floyd, and then Willie Young obviously rotating in there. That would be a pretty remarkable front 7 for this group. The question is that front 7 so good that it can mitigate some of the deficiencies that the Bears might have on the back end? And they were hoping, you follow the money. They put a lot of money and high draft picks and outside linebacker, hoping that the pass rush could be so good that it didn't matter who their corners and safeties were. And necessarily it didn't matter, but they didn't need to invest as much. That didn't work out last year. A lot of injuries up front with Eddie Goldman, Pernell McPhee, Leonard Floyd had injury issues, obviously Danny Trevathan. We're going to see when he comes back. So, maybe it's time to find that playmaker to put in the secondary, whether it is a Jamal Adams back in the top 10 pick, something like that. Nate Peterman, second day for sure. That's a great question. These quarterbacks are really going to kind of move up and down, like my little up and down thing here, through the process. So we're going to learn more about Nate Peterman at the Combine. We're going to learn more about Nate Peterman at his pro day. We're going to learn more about all these quarterbacks. So stay tuned. You got rounds 2 and 3. Right now, I can see him, certainly being a middle round pick. I'm going to do you guys a solid here and figure out where we are projecting him right now. Greg Gabriel in our Pro Football Weekly Draft Magazine. The current projection for Nate Peterman is going to be, let me call him up here. We've got him projected right now as it looks like to be a third, maybe 4th round pick. So maybe the end of that day too. Remember, quarterbacks a lot of times get overdrafted, so it's something we will see. A question here about Jay Cutler. Do I agree it's time for him to go? Yeah, I think we all know who Jay is. Can you believe he's been the starting quarterback for the Bears for 8 years? That's crazy. 8 years, 1 playoff appearance, 1 playoff win. You can argue when you look at his stats, his talent, that he's the best quarterback the Bears franchise has ever had, which says more about, I think, the Bears franchise than just says Jay Cutler. I thought it made great sense for them to bring him back in 2015 when Fox and Pace got here. They didn't have really any other better options, and he played well in 2015. And last year he was hurt twice, and he didn't play well. So, they talk so much about availability, decision-making, accuracy. They know what Jay Cutler is, and I think they know it's time to find another option in that position. Now, it's probably going to take them a while to move on from him, but I think that eventually is going to be what happens. Dan Mott, who you got? Checking in. about John Fox. The professional players all love playing for John Fox. I imagine the college players like it too. He's not the type of kind of guy that's going to bark at them, and maybe a little different than some college coaches they're used to. So they probably liked maybe his laid back style. I would have loved to. I didn't get a chance to talk to wide receivers. I would have loved what they thought of Curtis Johnson, the Bears wide receivers coach. He's such a fun coach to watch in practices, and I imagine they enjoyed kind of the tutelage they received from CJ, as he's affectionately known around the Chicago Bears. So. It's just a great opportunity for the Bears coaches to really get to know some of these guys and, keep an eye on the North roster. Get to know some of these guys' names. 1, 2, 3 of these guys are going to be drafted by the Bears. It's just mathematically, it's just what's going to happen, and maybe a little more so knowing that the Bears know these guys so well. All right, last question here. Oh, it's a deep one. If Alshon goes, talking about some other wide receivers, because obviously if the Bears don't re-sign Alshon Jeffrey, don't put the franchise tag on him, wide receiver jumps up their needs list. You have no idea what you're going to have in Kevin White. Not even sure if Eddie Royals is still going to be on the team next year. Cam Meredith was nice, but is he a number one? Probably not, but a pretty good number two. If Alshon's gone, you look anywhere you can to get some more wide receiver talents here. Cooper Kupp, Eastern Washington kid, put up huge numbers in college. Zay Jones, I mentioned him from East Carolina. Those are two guys who really impressed here. I mentioned Darboh from Michigan, Doral from LSU, and then there's going to be a bunch of junior wide receivers that weren't here. The question is how rich of a pick do the Bears use on that? I think if Alshon's gone, you got to look into bringing a wide receiver in with a second or third round pick to join Kevin White to see what you got there. At that spot. I think, too, looking at that slot receiver position, there was a couple pretty good slot. I said Ryan Switzer, one of my best favorite players here. That guy's a fourth, fifth, sixth rounder, but could be a pretty good slot receiver, compete with Daniel Braverman for that spot. Zay Jones could probably play the slot a little bit, too. So I imagine the receiver is going to be a spot they look at some point, and if Jeffrey's gone, pretty high. All right, these quick ones, Bears thoughts on Brad Kaya. I'm not sure what the Bears necessarily think of Brad Kaya. We could learn more about Brad Kaya in general as the weeks go on. In terms of how the Miami quarterback stacks up. Jimmy Garoppolo, first and third pick. It's so tough with Jimmy Garoppolo. It's hard to say how a guy's going to look outside the Patriot system, but I'll say it once, I'll say it 1,000 times. If the Bears believe in Jimmy Garoppolo, if they believe from what they know about him that he could be the answer, you back up the Brinks truck to Bill Belichick's house and you ask him what he wants. But I don't know if necessarily the Bears think that or want to go in that direction. All right, I'm going to wrap up here from Mobile, Alabama. Thanks so much, guys, for joining the Facebook chat. ProFootballWeekly.com's got all our coverage from the Senior Bowl. For Bears-specific coverage, ProFootballWeekly.com/Bears. Give me a follow on Twitter at KFishbane and at Bears_Insider. And hope everyone has a great weekend.